Hey everyone, welcome back to the English podcast. Today, we're diving deep into some amazing stories. So, grab your coffee and let's get started.
Today's material is a script for a show called The New Horizon, detailing a 5-phase strategic guide for professionals moving to a new country, along with a B2 level English vocabulary list. I can see what you're going for here with this practical guide. Let's see how we can strengthen this, starting specifically with how this script serves its B2 C1 English learning audience.
Right, yeah.
And to begin, I want to look at the structural placement of that vocabulary. Right now, the vocabulary words like transferability and cultural intelligence is placed at the very end of the document. As I understand it from the notes, the argument here is that providing a glossary at the end is standard practice. But I'd push back and say that audio is a linear medium. Listeners can't flip to the back of the book while they are driving or walking.
Absolutely. Integrating vocabulary instruction naturally within the narrative flow enhances the learning experience for upper intermediate language learners.
Yeah, it really does.
The primary weakness in the current draft is that it isolates these critical B2 vocabulary terms at the very end of the piece. By putting terms like transferability and cultural intelligence in an outro glossary, we are entirely disconnecting the educational value from the context where the listener actually encounters and, needs to comprehend those words.
Well, it fundamentally misunderstands how people consume audio. When I hear the word transferability in the middle of Phase 2, I need to know what it means right then to understand the advice about credentialing.
Exactly.
If I have to wait until minute 15 of the audio to get the definition, I've already lost the thread of the strategic advice. I've missed the entire point of Phase 2 because my brain got stuck on a word I didn't fully grasp. We are forcing the listener to hold an unknown variable in their working memory for 10 minutes.
And the compounding effect of that cognitive load is severe. For a B2 or C1 learner, their working memory is already operating at near capacity because they are processing a second language in real time.
Oh, for sure.
They are parsing grammar, translating idioms, and interpreting the B2 C1 English tone, speaking style of the narrator all at once. If they hit a speed bump, like an undefined academic term,
They don't just miss that one word.
right, the processing stalls. By the time they recover, the audio has moved on, and you have lost their attention entirely.
Which means the script fails as both a language tool and a strategic guide. So, what is the mechanical fix for a strictly audio format?
The suggestion is to weave brief, natural definitions or context clues directly into the spoken monologue, exactly as the words are introduced. This turns the script into an active, immersive learning tool without breaking the encouraging, conversational tone of the piece.
I love the idea of an active learning tool, but I want to challenge the mechanics of how we actually write that for audio. If we just read dictionary definitions in the middle of a paragraph, it's going to sound incredibly clunky.
Yeah, that's true.
It might sound like, think about transferability. Transferability means the ability of your skills or degrees to be accepted in another country. That immediately kills the pacing. It sounds like a textbook, not a premium podcast.
Well, the risk of sounding like a textbook is high if we use formal dictionary framing, but there are far more elegant ways to do this. Consider these as just a few of many possible solutions to implement this naturally.
Okay.
For instance, the writer can use a seamless apposition. When mentioning the shortage occupation list in Phase 1, the script could immediately add a natural clarification. That is, a government registry of jobs they urgently need to fill.
Ah, I see the distinction. You don't announce that you are defining the word. You just naturally restate it.
Exactly.
A government registry of jobs they urgently need to fill. That sounds like natural spoken English. And from a production standpoint, the voice actor can use their tone and pacing, maybe a slight drop in pitch and a micropause to bracket that definition so it feels like a helpful aside rather than a vocabulary drill.
That subtle shift in delivery is a cornerstone of advanced English tone speaking, and modeling it helps the listener learn how native speakers use intonation to clarify complex thoughts. Another concrete example, using a different mechanic, is the rhetorical question.
Okay, how would that work?
Let's take the word resilient in the conclusion. Instead of defining it outright, the script could say, "You will need to be resilient. Can you bounce back quickly when the visa office inevitably loses your paperwork?"
Wow, that's a brilliant workaround. The question itself forces the definition into the listener's mind. You are defining the word by showing its immediate, highly relevant application.
Yeah, exactly.
The listener absorbs the meaning without ever realizing they are being taught. It builds an immediate bridge between the unknown word and the listener's comprehension.
And by integrating these definitions, the script respects the listener's time and cognitive bandwidth. They learn the word in the wild in its natural habitat rather than in a sterile glossary at the end.
Right. Since we are focusing on how the language serves a sophisticated C1, B2 audience, that brings up another critical point about the specific phrase choices used in these 5 phases. The script relies on some very common idioms to create its conversational tone. Things like, it's not what you know, it's who you know, or describing the first 6 months as a roller coaster, or saying moving abroad is a marathon, not a sprint.
We hear those all the time.
Yeah, I can see what you're going for here by using idioms to sound conversational, but I'd argue that relying on cliches is a bit like serving fast food at a dinner party. It's easily recognizable, but it's not memorable or challenging for an advanced English learner.
Replacing familiar idioms with fresh, original metaphors elevates the sophistication of the script, better serving an audience eager for nuanced expression.
Right.
The inherent weakness here is that the material heavily relies on these well-worn cliches, which makes the strategic advice feel somewhat generic. But more importantly, from a language acquisition standpoint, relying on dead metaphors misses a valuable opportunity to challenge the advanced English learner's vocabulary with vivid, original imagery.
I want to push back on that just a little bit, because I know that when you are at a B2 level, learning idioms is often seen as the holy grail. It's the moment a language learner starts feeling like a native speaker.
That's a fair point.
Isn't there substantial value in teaching them foundational phrases like marathon, not a sprint?
Well, the issue with teaching foundational idioms in a guide like this is that it underestimates the audience's proficiency and their goals. Yes, there is value in understanding a cliché when they hear it at the grocery store, but this script isn't a beginner's phrase book.
No, it's not.
It's a strategic guide aiming to inspire and educate highly capable professionals, engineers, doctors, developers. If the language we use to guide them is composed of tired tropes, we lose our authoritative voice.
I see what you mean.
Furthermore, idioms often carry deeply embedded cultural assumptions that might alienate an international audience. A C1 learner doesn't just want to mimic native speakers by repeating phrases. They want to learn how to manipulate the language creatively. They want nuance.
So, a key theme running through this material seems to be the tension between being accessible and being sophisticated. If fast food idioms are off the menu because they are lazy writing, how do we create that engaging conversational tone without resorting to cliches?
The suggestion here is to invent new, culturally neutral but highly descriptive analogies that tie specifically to the themes of global travel, relocation, and career building to replace these standard tropes.
So we lean into the theme.
Exactly. You replace the standard tropes with language that activates their imagination and utilizes the specific vocabulary they're already trying to master.
Okay, so what I really like about this part is that it forces the writer to be a fundamentally better storyteller. We aren't just swapping words, we are upgrading the entire conceptual framework. What would that look like in practice for this specific script?
Let's look at a few concrete examples of how to execute this. The prober emphasizes these are just a few options. Take that line from the host's note. Moving abroad is a marathon, not a sprint. It's a dead metaphor. No one actually pictures running a race when they hear it.
No, definitely not.
A concrete alternative could be, moving abroad is like navigating a complex foreign transit system. It requires patience, strategic transfers, and looking at the long route.
Oh, that's infinitely more evocative. It actually gives the listener a mental image of standing in a sprawling subway station trying to decipher a color-coded map.
Right, it's tangible.
It mirrors the feeling of moving abroad perfectly, and it uses vocabulary navigate, complex, transit, strategic, that a relocating professional needs to know.
The thematic cohesion makes the language much richer. Another example, let's look at Phase 5, where the script says, the first 6 months are going to be a roller coaster.
Right.
A roller coaster is a purely passive experience. You are strapped into a seat. You have no control over the trajectory. and you just scream until it's over. But moving abroad is intensely active. It requires agency. Instead of a roller coaster, describe it as a climate with unpredictable weather, full of sunny breakthroughs and sudden storms of homesickness.
I love the agency in that metaphor. If it's a climate with unpredictable weather, you can prepare for it. You can buy an umbrella. You can learn to read the forecast.
Exactly.
It inherently suggests that the listener has the power to develop coping mechanisms, which aligns perfectly with the purpose of a strategic guide.
Building on that point about capturing the true weather or turbulence of the experience, I wonder if the narrative arc itself fully captures that turbulent transition.
Oh, that's a great question. Let's look closely at the section discussing the arrival in Phase 5. Is the connection between the meticulous, logical planning in Phase 1 and the sudden loneliness in Phase 5 fully established? Because to me, it feels like we skipped the turbulent plane ride and the culture shock entirely.
Highlighting the specific emotional friction between the planning phases and the physical arrival creates a more compelling and realistic narrative arc for the protagonist.
Yeah, we go from Phase 3, which is heavily focused on building a network on LinkedIn and securing credentials, straight into Phase 4 and 5, where you already have the visa, the apartment, and the job.
Right, it's a bit jarring.
The material makes a strong case for the logistics by highlighting the hidden requirements and the shortage occupation list. It is highly pragmatic. But the protagonist to the script, the listener, is a human being about to uproot their entire existence. When we just snap our fingers and say, "You have arrived, now what?" I admit I feel a profound sense of narrative whiplash.
Yeah, the weakness here is that the transition from Phase 3 directly into Phase 4 and 5 feels overly seamless. It skips the jarring, visceral shock of arrival, the exact moment the abstract plan collides with reality, which slightly flattens the emotional journey and the listener's connection to the struggle.
The transition implies that the hardest part was doing the paperwork. But anyone who has moved abroad knows the paperwork is just the prologue. The real challenge, the true test of a person's resolve, is the psychological displacement of waking up in a time zone where you don't know a single soul.
Precisely.
If we skip over that, the advice that follows feels unearned.
The suggestion here is to introduce a brief transitional moment of Phase 3.5 that acknowledges the sheer displacement of stepping off the plane, establishing the emotional stakes before shifting into the coping strategies of the first 6 months.
That makes total sense.
If we don't acknowledge the profound shock of arrival, the advice in Phase 5 about finding a local coffee shop to build a routine feels a bit trivial. We have to show the listener why finding that coffee shop is quite literally a matter of psychological survival.
How do we do that without turning a professional, pragmatic career guide into a sprawling, dramatic diary entry? We still need to maintain the tone of a strategic guide, and we can't afford to derail the pacing with a 10-minute emotional tangent.
The constraints are incredibly important here. We are not talking about adding 10 minutes of audio. This Phase 3.5 should be a tight 45 to 60-second audio vignette, maybe 100 to 150 words maximum. You accomplish this by zooming in on a micro moment that represents the macro struggle.
Give me an example of that.
Well, here are a few specific ways to do this. You could add a short, vivid scene describing the heavy, oppressive silence of the first night in an empty, unfamiliar apartment, listening to sirens or street noises that sound fundamentally different from the ones back home.
Oh, that's incredibly relatable. The acoustics of a new city always sound alien. The pitch of an ambulance siren in Europe is completely different from one in North America. Focusing on a very sensory detail like ambient noise grounds the listener immediately. It paints a picture using audio cues.
Right. A sensory detail does heavy lifting in a very short word count. Or, to tie it back to the language learning aspect, the writer could describe the sudden, overwhelming exhaustion of trying to buy basic groceries in a new language, despite having a flawless, heavily researched career plan.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine a scenario where the listener has that plan on their laptop, but they are standing in a supermarket aisle, utterly paralyzed because they don't know the local word for a specific type of flour or laundry detergent.
That contrast is brilliant. You have a highly competent C1 level professional who can navigate international credentialing, reduced to feeling helpless over a box of laundry detergent. That is the exact friction we are talking about. It completely validates the listener's emotional experience.
Exactly.
When the script subsequently says there will be days where you feel lonely and overwhelmed, the listener will believe it because the script just proved it understands exactly why they feel overwhelmed.
And the pedagogical value of this structural addition is immense. Anchoring advanced vocabulary and strategic advice to high-stakes emotional experiences makes the language incredibly sticky.
Yeah, it really cements it.
When a C1 learner connects the word resilient not just to a dictionary definition or even a rhetorical question, but to the visceral memory of standing confused in a foreign grocery store, that vocabulary word is locked into their memory forever.
It brings everything full circle. We are pulling the vocabulary out of the glossary at the back of the book, we are pulling the tone away from generic cliches, and we are putting the listener right into the middle of the storm where the language actually lives.
We want the structural architecture of the script to reflect the reality of the experience it is describing. By addressing the vocabulary placement, the sophistication of the metaphors, and the emotional pacing, the script transforms from a simple checklist into a deeply resonant guide.
This has been a fantastic, granular breakdown of how to elevate a script for a highly capable audience. To concisely recap the 3 main actionable suggestions for our listener today. First, integrate your B2 and C1 vocabulary definitions contextually into the natural flow of the script, using tools like appositives and rhetorical questions, rather than banishing them to an isolated list at the end.
Right.
Second, swap out those familiar cliches like roller coaster and marathon for vivid, theme-specific metaphors like complex transit systems and unpredictable weather to truly challenge and engage a sophisticated English learning audience. And third, add a brief 150-word moment of emotional friction, a phase 3.5 between the planning phases and the arrival phase to ground your strategic advice in the visceral reality of culture shock.
The underlying architecture of this guide is incredibly strong and deeply useful for its target demographic. I warmly invite the listener to implement these structural and tonal edits, and please submit your revised work back to the critique for further exploration. We would love to see how this evolves and how the new metaphors take shape.
Moving abroad is one of the most complex transitions a professional can make, and writing a guide that captures both the logistical hurdles and the emotional reality requires an immense amount of craft. Until next time.